Our hope and prayer for this podcast is that our content will meet you right where you are and leave a spark that only God can fan based on His Word. We will give credit where credit is due when we remember. Most of our content is based on our life experiences and training, not to be substituted for the Word of God in your life.
Welcome to the Connected Heart Podcast. We are two Christian women
Here to laugh, have some fun, and engage in authentic conversations that lean into the power of connecting with God.
because thinking about God and thinking with God are not the same things. Well, welcome back to the Connected Heart Podcast. We're so glad you're with us again, getting ready to go right into the holidays.
I know.
Very exciting. So we've got follow-up questions. We have lots to discuss today, but we're going to start with the morning walk. Now, my morning walk this morning is not from a walk.
Okay.
So,
That's allowed.
but it fits right into the morning walk. So my granddaughter, who is 4, has informed me that there's a difference between a snack and a treat.
She is a smart little girl.
She is. And it was almost a curious question because I thought, okay, I know she's working me, so I got to figure out what this kid is getting to. So she did make sure that I understood that the yogurt she had gotten was a snack. It was not a treat, and that she needed a treat, which meant she needed sugar. Yeah, pretty sure that's it.
Pretty sure that's what it meant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my nutritionist would agree with that, which is interesting because it actually leads to my curious question of the day.
Well, of course it does.
Yeah.
Of course it does. And your curious question is?
Well, I'm just wondering, why can't, because it is the holiday time,
Yes.
why can't 100 calories of cake be as nutritional for you as 100 calories of protein?
Oh, I can hear all those little nutritionists out there. Empty calories.
I know,
No
I
nutrition.
know, I know. But I've got to tell you this story because
Okay.
I think my mother thought so.
Okay.
My kids were little, and it's funny because just recently my oldest daughter and I were having this conversation, and she says to me, "Mom, I remember this conversation between you and Grandma, and I remember exactly what you said." I was like, wow, this
Ooh.
left an impression. But we were staying at my mom's, and my kids were probably, my oldest was probably 5, maybe 6, and the next one was like 3 or 4. And we had a big family to do the day before, and we had fresh strawberries from my mom's garden, which delicious, great breakfast food, right? And I walk in the kitchen, and there sits my second one with a bowl of ice cream covered in strawberries. And I said, "Mother, what are you feeding my son for breakfast?" And she said, "Well, I'm feeding him milk, eggs, and fruit." I was like, "Really, Mom?
Yeah.
You're feeding him ice cream and strawberries?"
Yeah.
And she said, "Well, that's what he wanted."
Well, of course. And I think that goes right back to the snack or a treat.
Oh,
Honestly,
my goodness.
honestly, I
But,
love it.
aren't we kind of that way too?
Well, yeah.
Lord, I mean,
I can justify anything. Just ask me.
right. And I mean, we talked about that whole preparing for the fire in a previous episode.
Yes.
And it's like, we're like, God, could we like skip the fire part?
Right. Right. So I think the cliffhanger was the question of how do we support growth in one another, right?
Absolutely.
And how do I support you not eating ice cream for every meal for your 100 calories?
Well, even though it is milk and eggs.
I know.
I know.
I'll try to support you as a good friend during these holidays.
I
love it.
appreciate that. And just in my own defense, I was not in agreement with my mother and never again gave my children ice cream and strawberries for
Oh,
breakfast.
no, I think you were trying to stuff them in a mold. That's what I think you were doing. So if you didn't listen to the previous episode, you might want to listen to that. So know about stuffing in a mold.
There you go.
Yeah,
There
we
you go. Well, we got into this subject just a little bit during our Bible study class, our live class.
Oh,
And we talked about the power of your tongue.
oh, yeah.
And the people in the class really connected with that idea and saying, man, that's one of the biggest challenges for me. But I would say the easy answer to our question that we left everybody with is we use our tongue to, as Proverbs 18:21 tells us, speak life.
Right.
It says we can speak life or death with the power of our tongue. That's how powerful our tongue is.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes we're so quick to critique other people. It's like we let the critic in the room too soon.
Yes.
And even that whole idea of the mold, that's part of the problem. We would critique each other's Christian walk as opposed to just walking alongside someone and building them up with our words, you know?
Yes.
Or are you building up the person in the mirror? Or are you tearing them down?
Or are you so busy trying to be like somebody else and not uniquely you who God made you to be?
Yeah.
I mean, I see that. I mean, I'm certainly guilty of it in my own life, but seeing it everywhere, that people trying to be like everybody else and fitting into that mold. So,
It reminds me of a saying I saw once. And the saying was, when you speak, whose voice comes out?
ooh, that's good.
Right?
Is that on?
It's
is
not
that
mine.
on your? Is that on your quote wall?
It should be, right?
It should be.
It really should be, but because if we're trying to look like someone else or we're trying to fit a mold
Yeah.
of what a good Christian should be or a good mother or a good wife or a good anything.
Yeah.
A good 30-something, a good 20-something, a good, 60-something. If we're trying to fit a mold, whose voice is coming out when we speak? And is that voice speaking life or is it speaking death? Because we've got the power of both in our tongue, that's sobering.
It is. And during the class, it was an intense conversation. It was so good. But so many in that room, including you and I, had taken words that had been spoken to us that were not true
Mm-hmm.
and cemented them in our hearts, in our brains, that really affected a lot of things in our lives, the lies that we believed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we've just carried him over the years.
Right.
And actually, we then talked a little bit about the mind's eye and our perceptions,
Mm-hmm.
and that we can even be deceived by the things we see and the things we experience, because if we have that strong belief, whatever those words were,
Mm-hmm.
and we believed them to be true, you aren't something enough. We'll go through life looking for data points to prove that it's true because we believe it to be truth, right?
Right.
And we talked about that and how debilitating that can
Mm-hmm.
be. And I think I've talked to you about it in the past, how, when you have something like that in you that you adopted early on when
Oh,
you
yeah.
were young,
Yes.
and there was strong emotion attached with it, that whatever, let's just name an age. I adopted that thought when I was 10 years old, and now I'm 60 something, but when something happens, the 10-year-old comes back out.
Oh, absolutely.
And that 10-year-old belief, because it might be something unresolved, some word that was spoken over us, and the hurt of it is still unresolved. It's a big deal, and helping people recognize that in their own life.
Well,
How powerful is that?
that is very powerful. And you and I have, both being life coaches, we've had the privilege of walking through that with individuals. And that's why I'm so passionate about it, is working through those things with the end in mind. Does that information that you're holding on to keep you from getting what God intended and wants for you with the end in mind.
Absolutely.
And it's always a privilege when I get to walk with somebody through that, and we go through, and they always go, well, that wasn't as bad as I thought. And I go, exactly. It is, it's not that bad.
No.
Because when the light is shined on it, you're like, oh, I see that completely differently now. Although it was said.
Yes.
So I think that's why the class got so fired up, because it's powerful.
It is powerful. It is powerful. And that whole idea of the light being shined onto whatever it is you fear.
Yes.
Or you're avoiding or whatever. And so a funny story on me,
Okay,
right?
good.
Like at our house, we have scorpions and tarantulas.
Oh.
Yes, they're so like, I love scorpions and tarantulas not. Like one day there was a small tarantula sitting by my front door. And my daughter and I came driving into the driveway, and she spotted the tarantula because she likes them even less than I do.
Oh, okay.
But I had to call my husband and say, you must come home from work. We cannot get in the house because there's a tarantula in front of the door, and you need to kill it so I can get in the house. Now, all the tarantula lovers listening to the podcast, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I'm very sorry. Yes. I'm trying to love them, but I don't. But anyway, when I go to my garage, because I had a terrifying moment with almost having a tarantula on my hand in our garage one time.
Okay.
When I go to open the door between my laundry room every time and the garage, some weird fear overtakes me that there's a human-sized tarantula out there.
Okay.
And so I know I need counseling.
I was going to say, Sandy.
Where's Jordan when I need her?
I was just going to say, we'll call her in.
Okay. Well, but anyway, when I open the door, I reach my hand out and hit the light switch real quick so that the light can dispel my fear that there's this gigantic tarantula anywhere out there. And by gigantic, it could just be the size of my palm.
Well, it doesn't matter. It's a tarantula.
Exactly. I mean,
they're not my favorite.
Exactly. And so I have that weird fear. But it's interesting what light does to that fear, right? It's like, oh, well, that was a silly fear. But in that moment, my heart was racing.
Oh, I'm sure.
I didn't want to open the door.
No.
I mean,
but we have a powerful light that will shine on those areas when we ask.
Well, and I think that's a point to how powerful is the mind.
Mm-hmm.
My mind on something that's like a sci-fi movie, right? In my own garage. There's no sci-fi movie in my garage. And there's never going to be a human-sized tarantula. But my mind can tell me and put that much fear in me.
Oh.
And so having God's light and having friends and Christians who, when you have that sci-fi kind of fear that's attacking you with their tongue, your Christian friends come around you and say, hey, it's okay. I get it that you're fearful. Let's shine some light.
Yes.
And see if that fear can be dispelled, because we know it can.
When people ask me, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say to them when they're telling me something like that. And I always say, ask them if it's the truth. Ask them if it's the truth.
What a great approach.
And then they need to think about, is that true? So you're not giving advice. You're not telling someone what to do. You're planting a seed. Is that true?
Right. How true is that?
Right.
How true is that now?
I'm telling you, I could get an Academy Award for the movies that I make in my head. Honestly, they're unbelievable, the stuff I could come up with.
Absolutely. We are so creative.
Well, we're geniuses.
We've been called that.
We've been called geniuses.
There you go.
We're going to go with that. But
we're not alone. Everybody can tell such believable stories in their mind.
Right.
That it overtakes us. And so really filling our mind with with a different kind of language.
Yes.
And speaking that out loud so our own ear hears it. It reminds me of the book, The Gifts of Imperfection by Brené Brown, right? And she talks about that idea of scarcity thinking or sufficiency thinking, I think is what she called it. And she was actually quoting a different author even.
Yeah.
But they talked about how before your feet even hit the floor, you're saying, I didn't get enough sleep.
Yeah. That was good.
Right? That our minds immediately go to the lack instead of what we have. And I remember my daughter talking one time about, she was concerned about one of her girls because at the end of a day, like she would plan all these wonderful things that they would do like on a Saturday, and they'd go to an outing. And one of the girls would say, but we didn't get to
do this.
Yeah, because you had said we were going to, and we didn't get to do that. And she says, how do I help her see what we did get to do and let go of what we didn't get to do? And how reminded I am of my own self when I do that. And I say to God, but hey, I didn't get to.
Right. You know, I always think of my to-do lists because I am a list maker. I am. I'm not going to apologize for it because truly, if it is not written down, it's not going to get done. Or I don't remember. I'd like to say it's my age, but it's been this way my whole life. And I love scratching off my accomplishments. I love doing that. But then I would look at the one thing that I did not get done and just dread going, I got to move that to tomorrow's list. Well, that in itself would start the day off wrong.
Yes. Yes. I'm so glad you're making a true confession of a list writer because I am a list writer and have been in my life.
Yes.
And it would freak me out so much when I didn't get through my list in recent history that one of my daughters said to me, Mom, you can only put 3 things on your list a day.
Ooh.
Because I couldn't handle the fact that I didn't get it all done.
Ooh.
She said, you are way too hard on yourself and you underestimate how much time it takes to get certain things done.
Yes.
And she said, nobody ever finishes their whole list, so stop writing it.
Oh, yeah, but I have to write it.
I know.
I do. I mean, I should get a doctor's permission she can write a list. But I have adjusted my lists over the years. So all those list writers out there, like, we love you.
We do.
But we don't, we learned not to let the list control us.
Yes. Don't dwell on what you didn't get. Dwell on what you did get. And it's really, isn't that so like when it tells us in the Bible, in everything give thanks? And I'm like, really, Lord, everything? Because something would happen. I'd go, is this an everything, Lord? Because I'm not sure I can give thanks in this.
I know.
Right?
I have to check with him to find out if it's a sin or not. Sometimes the stuff going on in my brain and the stories I tell, I'll go like, oh, I don't know. Lord, if that was a sin, please forgive me because I didn't know. I've got a great story about that someday, but that's for another podcast. And if my daughter hears me say that, she'll go, oh, it's the Orlando story. So we'll put a pin in that for another episode because it's really a good one. It's really a good one.
I do want to leave with that idea that, you know, one of the things that can crowd out that scarcity thinking in us is really that idea of gratitude and being grateful for what you do have and not looking at what you don't have. And I know that those are simple words or a simple concept, but it's not easy. It's not always easy to give thanks when things are not, as my son would say, up and to the right, right? When they're not all in the positive column, right? How do you learn to give thanks for that? My husband would say it's about wanting, not getting what you want, but wanting what you got.
Yeah.
right? And just saying, thank you for this, Lord. And really reminding yourself to look at what's right in the world and not constantly focusing on what's wrong in the world.
That's right. That's right. Because again, he has given us so much, and especially in this particular season. And I think if all goes well, I think this episode will drop Thanksgiving week.
Yeah.
And so really where people will just like, oh, I'm thankful for the little things. And that's important too. But really looking at what God has done for you from birth to now.
Yes.
And focusing on, I call them spiritual markers, spiritual things that only the two of you know.
You and God.
You and God.
Yeah.
And that gratitude and joy, because that's where authentic joy comes in, is that connection with God of the little things that only he knows. And I challenge people, if you can't come up with one, ask him and start looking.
Yeah.
Start looking, because he'll reveal those special times where you were alone and he met you right where you are. So those are the things to make sure that you look at and give thanks and gratitude for this season.
Yeah. His goodness can catch you by surprise.
Yes, it can.
But nothing ever catches him by surprise.